Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar titled Tips to Educate Employees on Data Security. My name is John Bergen, and for those of you who don't know IT Force is an award-winning IT managed services company based in Dublin City Centre, Dublin 2 to be precise. And we've won various international awards and recognitions for the quality of our service. You can visit our website www.itforce.ie for more details if you're interested in that. I see we have a very big attendance today, so I'll just kick ahead without delay and let everybody get to the meat of this. Just a small bit of housekeeping. We actively encourage questions, so if you want to go to the GoToWebinar dialog box and look for the questions drop-down menu, and just a tip from our experience with this before, put the questions down as they come to mind, and there you won't forget any. We'll deal with them at the end then. Okay, so here's our agenda. Mark Skelton is going to deal with cyber challenges facing organizations today, and then practical tips to help employees. He'll hand over to Charlie Hollenrake, who will go through the NoBefore product itself. And then we'll deal with any questions that have come up. And at the end, we'll have a little freebie as a small reward, and thank you for taking the time to attend. It's a free phishing security test. It's a one-off for up to 100 users. So moving ahead then, we're Cybersecurity Overview 2015. I put this slide up because basically things have changed a lot. And in 2015, when organizations had these 6 things in place, and they were fine in terms of security. So all the stuff we've now got to know and love, firewalls and passwords and web content and backups, disaster, anti-spam, etc. If you had these in place and you had worked with them and they were up to date, you were fine. And but fast forward to 2019, and things have changed pretty dramatically. It's widely accepted now that technology on its own is no longer good enough to counter the threats presented essentially by highly organized and well-resourced criminal gangs. And from speaking with our clients and from our own experience, we know that employees are being pressurized to hand over information relating to their network and their data kind of on a daily basis. So we believe it's incumbent on every organization, including our own here, to help employees to better understand and counter the threats they are facing. They are, as the slide says here, essentially the last line of defense. So with this in mind, IT Force have partnered with NoBefore to help solve this problem. NoBefore is a software that offers a systematic approach which educates and enables users to recognize and counter threats from sophisticated phishing and spear phishing campaigns. I always find a startling statistic: 90% of successful cyber attacks begin with an email. So that's quite startling in its own right. We plan in IT Force here to use the product internally for our own employees, as well as offering it to clients and prospects. We very much like and value the fact that NoBefore sits in Gartner's Magic Quadrant, which defines them as a market leader in this segment. So that's it by way of an introduction. So what I'll do now is I'll hand you over to our Mark Skelton. Mark, if you're there, I'll just...
Okay, hopefully. Can you hear me there, John?
I can hear you. Right, I'll pass it over to you then.
Excellent. I managed to hit the unmute button. Well, thank you. Okay, so my name is Mark Skelton. I'm the Chief Technology Officer with IT Force. I'm basically the head techie. And I'm here to talk about the cyber security challenges that are facing organizations in 2019. And I'm also hopefully going to give some practical tips as how you can help your employees to deal with these. I'm going to start by going back to one of John's previous slides, which was cybersecurity overview from 2019, basically how things are. back not so long ago, cybersecurity really was all about technology. It was a matter of putting very good technology between your users and the internet and the bad stuff, bad people out there. So firewalls, antivirus, web filtering, email filtering, etc. Now, it's absolutely the case that you should still continue to use and leverage that technology and the best next generation firewalls, antivirus, etc. But the reality is it's not enough anymore, and basically it's got to the point where end users are being increasingly targeted and are effectively that last line of defense, and often seen as the weakest link. If we jump on to the next slide there. Again, some of these facts might have been stated already. 91% of data breaches start with a spear phishing attack. So spear phishing is where somebody sends a fairly well-crafted email pretending to be somebody else or some other entity, and basically trying to get you to divulge information, very often your user credentials, which they'll use then against you. A somewhat startling statistic there is that a good number of those, a reasonable percentage, certainly between 5 up to 15% of these, can actually get through spam filters, and that's the best of the best spam filters. So there's absolutely no way to stop all of these. You'll stop some of them, but not all, and that's why it's important that your end users are, I suppose, empowered and educated in how to deal with them. 85% of organizations have suffered from phishing attacks. I might just ask John, apologies, John, if you wouldn't mind hitting your mute button there. I think it's John. Thanks, John. 85% of organizations have suffered from phishing attacks. That's probably a fairly conservative, I would say. It's probably closer to 100. I mean, we constantly see ourselves, all of our customers, being inundated with this stuff on a daily basis. So it's absolutely out there. And as I said, there's no way, no technology to completely stop it. The next one is a somewhat interesting one, is 97% of users cannot identify a sophisticated phishing email. Now, I suppose a lot there depends on the word sophisticated. We probably all get a fair number of unsophisticated phishing emails, the ones from PayPal, the ones from the Revenue, etc., that most people nowadays can probably spot, possibly get them more in our webmail and the like. But if you get, some of these emails are incredibly well crafted and incredibly sophisticated, to the point that I have seen cases where I couldn't tell whether they were legitimate or not. So, and this is what I do for the crust. So, I just urge caution there, that don't just assume that you'll automatically know or spot these things easily. It is very important that users educate themselves on how to deal with these. I mentioned earlier about web filtering and email filtering, basically that it can't fully take care of all of that. That's one of the reasons there is you get so many new sites set up. The question I am often asked is, well, why can't the technology take care of this? And can I not just get a better firewall? Or is there no better email filtering solution that'll just block all of this stuff and make it all go away? And the short answer is no. There's nothing. As I said, that doesn't mean you don't get the best that's available on the market, particularly the next generation type products. But there's nothing that will stop everything. I mean, there's a sample there below of one that will get through most web filtering. It's very well crafted. It's easy to see how somebody might accidentally or intentionally click on the review activity button. If they do, they'll be asked for their Office 365 credentials in this case, and if they are unfortunate enough to put those in there, they've just given the game away. And there is nothing out there that'll 100% guarantee that such emails won't get through, or that if somebody does click on the link, that it can be blocked by web filtering. They use very clever techniques such as website hacking, where they will embed their malicious code on a legitimate website, which makes it very difficult for web filtering to cater with it. And if we just jump to the next slide. Thanks. There's very big potential consequences for this stuff. Start by saying that there's been a big increase in cyber attacks since the start of the year. Just in the last couple of weeks, it just seems to be an enormous increase. That's not that unusual. It tends to come in waves, whereby things seem to go down a little bit quieter towards the end of last year. The last couple of months, you felt like we were winning the battle, and all of a sudden there's been a huge increase. Ransomware seems to have come back with the vengeance a lot in recent weeks. It was always was there, it hadn't gone away, but from the middle of last year onwards, we weren't hearing that much about it. It's like it had just petered out quite a bit, but it's certainly come back. There's been some quite high-profile attacks. You read them every day in the internationally large multinationals, the tech giants, etc., all being hit by this type of stuff. We've had some fairly high-profile attacks in Ireland in recent weeks. The Lewis website was probably one of the most high profile in terms of media. Most people will know that their website was hacked, and basically even when I checked this morning, the website is effectively still down. They've managed to get a kind of a bare bones version of it up, and that's after nearly a month. So it's incredibly embarrassing at a minimum to the company, and very disruptive. Musgrave Group were another company that were hit just a bit before Christmas there, which made very much the mainstream media, being a high profile SuperValu and various other companies. This was a somewhat more serious attack in that malicious software got installed internally on their systems with the purpose being to try and harvest credit card details from customers. Now, there's no particular evidence to say that was successful, but just the potential, the fact that it could have been there and there was no way to be certain that they didn't, just would have caused a lot of reputational damage to Musgrave. I mean, you do not want to, wake up on a Sunday morning and be reading, the name of your company in the Sunday Business Post or wherever tends to, you don't want the likes of me using your company logo here in a cybersecurity. As I say, the damage here can be big. There can be obvious financial damage that if it's ransomware, you may have to pay to get your data back, or you may have to pay a lot of money to get a cyber specialist in to sort it out. There's a lot of disruption to the company, but the really big one, particularly for anybody in the services industry, is the potential for reputational damage can be fatal to a company. So that there's very big. In those two cases, again, it was stuff that came in by email. Somebody unfortunately clicked on a link perhaps they shouldn't have clicked on, and had they maybe been better trained, there's a good likelihood that the attacks would never have happened. And if we just jump onto the next slide, I'm just going to talk, just go through a few practical tips. This isn't exhaustive by any means, but I just wanted to give a few hints. I'll start by saying that the cybersecurity culture really has to start from the top down. It really has to be just across the entire organization. It shouldn't be just something that gets, maybe wheeled out once every year and, somebody sends an email or, this is important. It really should be just constantly restated, reiterated. And most companies would have regular team meetings, team briefings, maybe newsletters, etc. And it should be a regular topic that's constantly being brought up and being put in front and center. Front and center. Sorry, I'm losing my ability to speak there. But really the use of a former cybersecurity training platform. Now, clearly, that's what we're here to talk about. The NoBefore platform is exactly that. Basically, that will formalize that, and it'll give a ability to have a proper ongoing program. As well as from a security point of view, there can be an important compliance part, from the likes of, say, if you're a financial, there'll be central bank requirement that you do cybersecurity training and that is properly documented and managed. So that's something that we'd strongly recommend. Username and password management, I'll mention that briefly. It's a kind of an obvious one, but first of all, have a good, solid, hardened password policy. Change them regularly. Don't have your password as password or password 123 or something like that. My first point in that there is not to reuse personal passwords for work. Now, what I mean there is, maybe your social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc., Gmail, which are not specifically work related. Don't use the same passwords for those as you would use for work ever. And I would probably go one further and don't even within those. So have a different password for Facebook as you would have for Twitter, etc. The reason is obvious, that if you manage to compromise one system, then if you're using the same password, they can very quickly compromise everything. Even if it can be difficult to remember all the different passwords, if you have some different variant, of the same word that you use across each of them. I'm a strong advocate of the use of multi-factor authentication. It makes it significantly more difficult for people to hack into your system. And even in a case where they've managed to, say, phish your credentials or otherwise get their hands on your username and password. If you're using multi-factor authentication, it's still, they won't be able to get in. So, by the way, multi-factor authentication, I'm sure most people know what it is, but it's typically where you have another factor, very often your mobile phone. So you put in your username, put in your password, and you receive an SMS text a few minutes later, and then you have to tap in the code. Also, most vendors, all the big cloud players, the Googles, the Apples, the Facebooks, Twitters, etc., they all provide multi-factor authentication on their platform, in a lot of cases for free. So I would strongly recommend its use. And that leads into my next point, really about securing all of your stuff, both work and personal/social media. You do increasingly see people's social media. So if somebody managed to, say, hack into your Facebook account, that they'll use that to launch attack against your friends and colleagues, or to gather additional information about your friends and colleagues. So basically, having a good solid password and regular changing and multi-factor authentication is to be strongly recommended there. And I'll just jump onto the next slide. Thanks, Kieran. Couple of more practical tips. This one is a little bit less obvious to some people, is about the use of unsecured Wi-Fi networks. Be careful in their use. I'm not saying that don't ever use them, because we all do. If you're in a cafe or something, and you might end up using the Wi-Fi in the cafe on your iPad, or I would regularly use the Dublin bus one on the way home in the evening. It's a little known fact that whoever controls the Wi-Fi point can, in theory, snoop on your data, even encrypt it, because they can decrypt it and then re-encrypt it and send it on again. So, for instance, if I'm on an unsecured, untrusted network, and by that I mean anything that isn't my work physically and that I control, or my home network, I would be very slow to do something like online banking. I would be a little bit careful about what I do. And if it's going to be general, browsing the web, then it's probably okay. If I'm in a hotel, I don't know, the Hilton or something, and I see something called Hilton Wi-Fi, it's probably okay. I'll connect to that and I'll do some stuff. Again, probably won't go do my online banking even there. If I'm sitting in a square somewhere in, I don't know, Paris, and I take out my iPad and I go looking and I see something called free Wi-Fi, I'm not going to connect to that. I have no idea who that is, what that's about. So again, it's maybe one that's a little bit less obvious. What probably is relatively obvious is the next one, is about securing your device. So basically, all your devices, laptop, phone, tablet, etc., making sure that they're all have an antivirus on them, that they're patched and up to date, using encryption, screen locks, and passwords. And point there as well, even something like a home PC can often be used for work. You may well check your webmail, your work webmail on that. That's why it's important to secure across the entire platform. And the one I'll finish with briefly, I hope I'm okay for time, is just to mention briefly about USB drives. There's an obvious risk there of data loss. So if you put a load of data on a USB drive and leave it on the bus, there's clearly a potential of a data breach for the company there. At a very minimum, I would recommend the use of encrypted drives, or just simply don't use them. But there's also another angle to this, that they're increasingly being used for viruses and malware, and you would often hear of attacks now where often larger companies are targeted by somebody physically going to the company and leaving a USB drive maybe on the floor in reception, in the hope that somebody will pick it up, stick it in their machine. And there's been quite a number of published cases of just that. So I used to be very careful with USB drives. Don't go plugging them willy-nilly into your machine. I think I'm more or less coming to the end of my talk. I realize that was a very quick gloss over of a few practical tips. If anybody has any questions or would like to talk in more detail, I'm more than willing to take that offline. And I think I'm getting ready to hand over to Charlie. I'm not too sure if you're there, Charlie.
Indeed. Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed. Thank you and welcome. I'm going to mute myself, and thanks for that.
Fantastic. Yes, so some really kind of sterling advice from Mark just there, and I'm going to show you how I can put this into some real kind of world tips in terms of the content we have available. I will go into that in some more depth now, but first I'm going to run you over some information as to how the program works. So obviously we've got all these tips with the USBs and the passwords. But some of you might have sort of hundreds of users or tens of users, and you need a good way to distribute this training out. And I'm going to show you a really effective way to do that very soon. But the way that the program works with KnowBe4 is the very first thing that you'll do is a baseline test of your users. This is where you send a simulated email out to every single one of those users. And the amount of people that actually click on those emails, it will come back as a percentage. So let's say you had 100 users and 25 people clicked. You guessed it, 25% phish prone percentage. And the idea is that that's how at risk you are to a real attack. And you're then going to work to bring that down over time at 25%. And the more kind of training, the more phishing that your users see, simulated phishing, the less at risk you are, really. And when I talk about the simulated phishing, it's a case of emails being sent out from the platform to test users, which aren't real phishing emails, but represent them, so that when a real attack comes along, they'll know exactly how to deal with these emails because of the training they've had and because of the simulated emails they've seen. So we start with that baseline test, and it gives us a good percentage as to how at risk we are. And the next thing you do is have some training sent out to your users. And there's a very easy way to distribute this. It's the way that you set out a campaign, and the training is automatically sent out to those users rather than you having to walk around and tell each of them what to do with an email. Again, linking back to the kind of advice that Mark had given just now, when we talk about USBs, for example, great. Yes, we know that USBs are dangerous, but how do we educate each of our users as to those being dangerous? And how do we then enforce that they're taking that into account? So that's another way. And particular training is based on phishing, but it covers several different subject areas. You then continue to phish your users, send these simulated emails out throughout the year. But when I say you would have to send them, it's the platform sending them automatically for you. And what you see is that you just see the reports of who's been clicking and what they've done with the emails. So it's a very much set it and forget it process with KnowBe4. You'd set the kind of training up and the phishing up, and your only responsibility then after that would be to just see the reports of these emails. And just onto the next slide here, I'm going to show you some real world results that we've achieved. So you can see here the initial baseline phish prone percentage, which is quite a mouthful. What that's to say is the percentage of users in an organization, the percentage that they got on average before they'd had any training. So what that's suggesting to us is that out of 6 million users that use our platform worldwide, more than 1 in 4 was the average, which is pretty bad, because if one of those people did receive a real phishing email tomorrow, there's a 1 in 4 chance that they're going to be exploited from it. And I'm sure all of you know the dangers that could be posed there. I'm just reading a question. Would you know who clicked on the link to give them further training later on? Absolutely. So that's a really good question, Omar, and I will definitely come around to that as we come to just keep that in mind, because as I go through here, I'm going to show you exactly how we do that and how we reduce this risk. But yeah, thank you. Very good question. And so just after that 1 year only of training, you reduce the average risk from 27% all the way down to 2%. So if you could just hand over control of me to me now, Kieran, I'll present the actual platform, and I'll make sure to answer your question too, Omar. Make sure I show the right screen here. There we go. Okay, so this is the first thing you see when you log onto the KnowBe4 platform. It's what we call the dashboard. And immediately you see here the organization's risk scores. This is an example organization here. But we do a number of checks, and one of them is the email exposure check. And this actually sees how many of your emails are out there exposed on the internet. Now, I'm not sure if any of you know the link here, but the more emails you have exposed on the internet, say, you know, your whole sales team has been putting their email everywhere, the more likely a cyber criminal is to get hold of that email and use it in an attack. There's not much you can do about that, but it does give you an indication of how at risk you are. We combine this risk score with factors such as the amount of emails the users are clicking on, the amount of training they're doing, and you should see this risk come down over time. It's a very accurate indicator to see how at risk you are of an attack. If I just scroll a bit further down here, you can actually benchmark your data against your peers in the industry. So let's imagine one of you is in banking, for example. We can see the baseline average for a company smaller than 250 users. And we can see here the industry phish prone for banking, less than 250 users, is 29.3%. So slightly above the average of 27. But we can also see what the general result is after a year, and that's 1.3%. So again, you can see the massive reduction in the risk from 29.3% to 1.3%. These lovely colorful bars here, they are all representative of an individual phishing security test. So if I highlight one of these, I can see straight away at face value Total emails sent on this test, 536. Total people clicked, 94. 50 people have entered data. And we've got a phish prone percentage on that particular test of 33.6%. And another tool that we've developed to really enhance this idea of a security culture is what we call the Phish Alert button. So realize that all of you will be users of either Gmail, Office 365 or Outlook. And if we take Outlook, for example, it's this little application here that sits above your email client. And it's a little kind of open letter with a orange fish hook there, which is kind of representative of our brand. And so every time a user sees a dangerous email, in normal organizations, they either forward them onto the user, which keeps the dangerous attack potentially in their inbox, or then it hassles the IT department, means they have a lot more work to do. With this, the user has a simple way of reporting a dangerous email. They click this button here, it will delete it from their inbox, send it to an inbox of your choice. You then be able to diagnose the email. You can send it back if it was a safe one. And if it was a dangerous one, you can make sure the domains are blacklisted and advise the user that it was safe. And further to that it was dangerous, sorry. And further to this, we do have it on mobile as well. I realize a lot of people now use mobile versions of Outlook, so that's available on there, the Phish Alert button. If I just show you what kind of message the user gets, this is an example here. So on a simulated email, so one that's come from the platform, they get a message like this: congratulations, the email you reported was a simulated phishing attack initiated by your company. So good job. Or if it's a real one, they get something like this: thank you for reporting this email to your security team. Because of people like you, our company is more secure. And the message you're giving Goss here is a real positive reinforcement. They really are making a difference in the organization. And they're then stakeholders, and they're influencing the security of your organization in a positive way. And it really does have a good effect. And we actually use this button in our own organization. So I can say from first hand that it's very effective. In terms of the reporting just there, we can actually see how many emails are being reported each day, how many simulated emails and how many non-simulated. So the simulated bars would be the green bars. So we've got 4 simulated emails reported that day and 8 non-simulated. So they can even report real phishing emails that they think might be suspicious too. So it's, again, a very handy, simple tool for the users to use that aren't particularly sophisticated. So that's kind of the basis of the platform and the dashboard. Next thing I want to show you is just how you create a campaign. So you're seeing a lot of different options here, and it's looking a bit all over the place. But the main point that I want to show to you here is that, first of all, when you create these phishing campaigns, you can have them randomized. What it means here is that I can define my business hours just here. I can send all the emails up from between the hours 9 till 5 over 5 business days. And what it means then is that each employee is going to get their phishing emails at a random time, which eliminates something which we call the prairie dog effect, stopping them from nudging each other and saying, watch out for this email. We get more realistic results than if they're all sent at the same time. So that's just one feature I want to mention to you. We can completely randomize the timing of the emails. What I'll show you now is an actual example of one of the emails. So I don't know if any of you have heard of DPD, but it's quite a popular kind of delivery brand. And we've got an example email here. Your order was due for delivery on Monday. This is the kind of email the user would see. Oops. Hang on. Sorry, gents and ladies. It's the kind of email you see. Your order was due for delivery on Monday. On Monday morning, we attempt to deliver your parcel. So it's trying to catch them out. It's trying to get them to click on, what's this parcel? Trying to prompt them. And say I'm the standard user, I'm going to go find my parcel. Great, because I've got some parcel coming. Now, this was obviously a simulated phishing email because of a certain number of red flags. And what we have is an option called a landing page, which can educate the user exactly as to what kinds of things in the email they should have spotted before they clicked on it. They can then take this onto real life use for next time they see a real dangerous email. But if I look at this message here, oops, you clicked on a simulated phishing test. Please review the social engineering indicator you found the email you clicked on. So if I highlight any of these little red flags in this email here, I can tell exactly what I should have spotted before I clicked on the email. So here I've got tells you to click on a link or open an attachment. Here I've got hover over the link. The link does not take you to the site the email content says it will. And just above the domain, email domain is spoofing a popular website or well-known organization. And the key here is that on the spot, the user can learn exactly what mistake they've made and take that lesson into next time. And it'll be the top of their mind as well, because as soon as they click, this is where they're taken. So it's a very effective way of gently educating the user rather than forcing something upon them. And another example of a phishing email here that would come from the platform, just to touch on the amount of emails we have on here, we have over 2,700 templates and also the ability to create your own templates. If But referring back to one of Mark's emails that he showed as an example, I have an Office 365 phishing email here. You can see it's very realistic branding. If you can just notice here, I'm sure a lot of you are very sophisticated in noticing these kind of threats, but we see the domain here. It's saying security at offlse364.com. So it's not quite right. This is not as difficult one because we've got a bit of a dodgy domain there. And it's saying to us, unknown attempt to access your email from new location, and we're going to get the option to review recent activity. So, okay, great. I'm going to review my recent activity. And in this scenario, we're going to be taken to what we call a data entry page, which is where it's going to prompt us to enter data into the platform. Obviously, when we talked about data breaches, 91% of data breaches occur from a spear phishing attack. This is the kind of thing we mean. When they present a page like this and try and prompt you to put your details in, that's when a real data breach is a serious threat to an organization. And key to this, it's no use if you can just give this landing page out to users. What you need to be able to know is exactly who's actually entered data onto this page. And the reporting at KnowBe4 is second to none. So if I'm looking here, I can see the exact reports on any of my phishing security tests. This is an example phishing security test. I can go on this tab here, and I've got a list of all the 8 people immediately who have entered data into the platform. So I've got Diamond just here, Anel, the exact time they entered data. We can even click on these little email icons to see which email they clicked on. In addition to that, I've got a list of all the people who clicked on the emails, and I can even dig into any individual user I want to. Now, we have a bit of a problem child at our organization called Fritz, and this is a fictitious character, but we like to pick on him anyway. And if we look here, we see Fritz has got a personal risk score just here, just like the organization does, but his might be higher than the average. And we can see he's got his own phish prone percentage too. So I mentioned to you that we've got an average of 27% across all organizations. This guy is way below average. He's a problem to the organization, and you might need to take a bit further action. So that's why it benefits you to be able to look in further depth in this respect. But I can just see in the top bar here, he's clicked on an email, and I can actually see the email that he clicked on, which is this 55th anniversary free pan pizza. I do hope you've all had lunch by this point, because it tends to melt my mouth if I do a demonstration of the platform about 12 o'clock. But yeah, that's a kind of example of what you see. And just towards the domain here, on the platform, we actually have the ability to spoof any domain. So if you really want to make your emails difficult, you could make it a very realistic one, spoof any domain you want. And that's part of one of the reasons that KnowBe4 is a leader, and mostly because of its training content, but also because of the fact we can spoof any domain we want. You've got a quick timeline of all the training the user has been through as well, and a full timeline of all their actions. So that's very much how you can see the depth of the reporting here. Now, this screen here I'm showing you is the mod store. Short, the lengthened version would be the module store, and you can see we have 790 modules of training in total just here. So this is split across 10 different publishers, all giving their own twist on the content. If we look by publish date just here, we can see that there are modules released on the 28th of January. There was 10 released on the 25th of January. So we're constantly updating and releasing these new pieces of content in accordance with the most recent versions of the threats. And again, as Mark said, these threats are being changed and getting more sophisticated every single day. So you need to keep up. And with KnowBe4, rest assured you'll be looked after in terms of the newest threats that are being released. I want to demonstrate to you the kind of duration of modules. I realize that a lot of people are very busy at the moment in this day and age, and I just wanted to make the point that 226 of our piece of content take 5 minutes or less to complete for a user. We have a number of ones that are 5 to 15 minutes, 15 to 30 minutes, 30 minutes or greater. They're split into different categories. So we've got training modules, which is where it'd be interactive for the user. They'd click on certain parts and be quizzed. We've got gamification or games, which I will actually show you in a couple of minutes. We've got posters and artwork. We've got videos, we've got newsletters and security documents. I've just realized now with the questions that I had a question from Omar, but I've lost it now actually. Yeah, that was a very good question, sir.
Charlie, so the question was, would you know who clicked on the link to give them further training later on? That was Omar's question.
That's a really good question. Thank you very much, John. I appreciate that. I've completely lost it there. So yes, Omar, I'm looking at the page here now when you create a phishing campaign. And what you can do is you can add clickers to a group called clickers. And what that means is that every time a user does click up, they'll be added to that group. And we can have rules set in place so that every time someone is added to a group, they're assigned a certain module of training. So to answer your question, as soon as they do click on a module of training, you can make sure that a piece of training is assigned to that criteria, i.e. they've clicked one time, they'll then be automatically assigned the training. So to answer your question, yes, we can absolutely do that. Apologies for the delay there. And just touching on more of the basis here of again, what Mark had said in terms of the content that we have on the platform. Anything you can think of, we cover data breach, we cover GDPR, we cover home internet security, we cover passwords and authentication. I don't know if any of you comply with PCI, payment card industry, but that's a feature that we have on the platform too in terms of the training. We cover USBs. Again, people don't believe it, but it's still within the top 5 attack vectors of cyber criminals. And we've even got things like spear phishing and kind of free Wi-Fi too. So if I just take free Wi-Fi, for example, I click on this, and I can see just here that we have 24 modules relating to Wi-Fi, for example. And jumping into one of the modules now, this is my personal favorite module on the platform. We have something here called the Spot the Fish game. So what you're seeing here is a 2-minute video on how to spot a bad link. But what the user now will be presented with is a game called the Spot the Fish game. And they just press play here, and they're going to be presented one email after another. What they've got to do then is say, is it a legitimate email or is it a phishing email? So if we just read this here, it might be a bit humorous for you all. Dear friend, my name is John Kelly. There's a text there. I'm giving my money away because of the health condition and the fact that my second wife is a terrifying woman to deal with. Marrying her was the only mistake I made in my life. So we've got a bit of humor there, but in all seriousness, this is most likely a phishing email because it's something that's too good to be true. You don't know who the person is, and it's something about money. So we're going to say it's a phishing attack. But the next one we're presented with an eBay invoice, and it's saying invoice at ebay.com. So realistic domain, that gets our thumbs up. We've got the branding there. If we highlight the link, it's a safe link. It's the ebay.com domain. So we're going to say it's legitimate. And these get more and more sophisticated over time, these emails, up to 21 emails. And what you can do is create a leaderboard and see who gets the best score. So it's a really fantastic way of educating users and getting them engaged, this gamification. That's just one example. And something that's available through NoBefore today is something called a mod store preview, a training preview, which I can have as a link sent out to anyone who's interested to be able to preview the training themselves in their own time to see what kind of modules they think would be relevant and see if it would be a good fit for your organization, really. So yeah, that's really an example of one of the training modules. There is 790. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go through all 790 today. But moving on to the next slide, what we're seeing here is the interface for the user. So let's imagine you've sent out the training campaign, and it's going to go out to all your users, and they're then going to have a list of all the modules they've been enrolled in just in this interface here. So I can see I've got to do the 30-minute security awareness training module, your role in internet security new, once more into the breach, which is a data breach module, and you can even attach policies to these modules too to make sure users sign off. We've got GDPR on there too. So this is just an idea of what the interface looks like for the user. We do also have a leaderboard for the training just here, so you can compare different departments against each other. And thirdly, we've got a list of badges, so users can actually collect these badges as they go along and do the training. So it's a real good way, again, to get them engaged. Just touching on this space here, we've got an option for a tour. So if I go back to training, it should be. So I've got a launch tour option here, so it would actually show me through and how to navigate this if the user was confused at all, but a very simple interface. And the final thing here, just to do the training. So I've just shown you some of the training, but we do actually have reports exactly on who's completed their training as well. So we're looking at the sales ongoing campaign here, one of the training campaigns. We can see that 28 users are in this campaign. We can see Aaron Anderson here. He's done his GDPR training. He's not started his employee policy, for example, but we can actually create a list of all the users who have the training incomplete in some respect. And we can also manually notify them through the platform too. Now, the last thing I have to say to you all, and I have really appreciated your time. I'm going to hand you back to John in 2 seconds, but first I'd like to offer you something as a kind of as a treat that John mentioned for joining us today and giving us your time. We really do appreciate it. It's a free phishing security test on up to 100 of your users. We spoke about this baseline phish prone percentage, and that is the first thing you do when you come on the platform. But to give you a bit of a taste and see how vulnerable users really are, we're willing to offer you today only, a free phishing security test up to 100 users, and there'll be a link sent out to you involving that. And in addition to this, we're happy to send you the ModStore training preview as well, so you can see all the training when you want to. I believe that's me, unless you have any more pointers to that, John. I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Charlie. That was very good, very comprehensive. So we have one other question. In fact, there's two questions in one here. I'm going to give this to you again, Charlie, just in case you're starting to relax there. Can the admin assign multiple modules for their employees to view and have the platform chase the employee with emails until they complete the content?
That's a fantastic question. Kieran, would it be difficult to let me share my screen quickly again so I can just show an example of that? Because that's a fantastic question. I really like to demonstrate that. Just going to be waiting to get to share the screen here if it's possible. Thank you very much, Kieran. So I'm just going to share my screen again here. Can everyone can see that? I'm assuming. So if I go into the training just here and I press create campaign, I'd call it whatever name I wanted, for example, and maybe onboarding, and I give the user a relative duration, say 3 weeks, for example, to do the training. We choose the content that we want. So it might be the GDPR, Kevin Minnick security awareness training and social engineering modules. We then choose exactly which groups we want to enroll. You might want to choose IT or auditors or accounting, but you can choose all users as well. Now, with reference to your question, those are the modules that we've got ordered right there. We have a notification system too. So what we can do is we can sort a certain notification. And this one here, we can say, remind them after enrollment, send it 5 days after enrollment and repeat it every 5 days. So what this allows you to do, in answer to your question, is the admin can definitely assign training modules and they can leave it to the platform to prompt the user. So this is going to remind them 5 days after and continue to remind them every 5 days until they complete the training. And you can make sure that the manager and the admin is notified of this, as well as the user if you'd like to. So you could tell the manager after a certain amount of time that it's still not completed it, same with the admin and same with the user. So I hope that answers your question. And I should pass you back to Kieran now. I trust it does answer your question.
So there's another question for you, Charlie, just while we're working you to death here. Can overall module completion progress be visualized?
Overall, absolutely. Another very good question. I guess I'll stay on the screen. So yeah, we go into the training campaign here and we'll look at one of the example campaigns. So this would be the sales ongoing campaign. So you usually have a number of campaigns. And we have a statistic here that says 68% of users have completed all the courses. So yeah, it says exactly what percentage each is completed. The 2018 GDPR module is 93% completed by users. The employee policy is 68% completed. And we can even see the number of users that start at least one course per day. So any depth you want to go into, you're absolutely welcome to do.
Okay, well, I think that's it. There's some very good questions, and thank you for those. And thank you, Charlie. We put you on the spot there.
No
so what I'll do now is we'll just wrap up. I think we're pretty much on time. So at the end of all of this, you'll receive an email from our Kieran. Each attendee, and you'll be prompted if you want to take us up on that free 100 user test. Just follow the instructions, and it'll take you to a website, and you can enable those licenses. So that's it, really. And thank you all very much for attending. I hope you've got got what you wanted from it, and thank you again. Okay, we'll just wrap it up there.